Are you gonna let me start the show, Sabrina? You're gonna let me start? Can we do this thing now? No.
Nope.
You had to get like Louis. You had to get the last word. Hello and welcome to another episode of Tech Deck Karaoke. This week we are joined by Gabe Guillen, who is our second guest who's had the unfortunate experience of having to work for me. And so Gabe can tell you some of those horror stories as we go on to Sabrina's delight, which is why she's smiling. Gabe,
Right.
Hello, welcome. Please introduce yourself to our audience here.
Absolutely. I'm Gabe Guillen. I am a technical marketing engineer, not for Cisco anymore. I'm for Nozomi Networks now, which is a cybersecurity company that operates in the operational technology environment. So yes, I did have the opportunity to work for Joe. He is the reason why I'm a technical marketing engineer. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. So I'll let my employers tell us if that was a good thing or not. But anyways, that's the reason why, Joe coming out of a bathroom for whatever reason and then telling me, hey, you work for LATAM? Have you worked for LATAM? Yeah, sure, I have. I want you in my team. And essentially that and a couple more questions was all that I needed to become part of the back then INSBU. So that's not a horror story, but it's a nice story to tell. So I had to interview like 7 times when, got in the latest gig. But anyways, nothing against them.
I have never been a fan of making prospective employment candidates jump through fiery hoops as if it's a paid position just to get the job. I think that is toxic. But with that, Sabrina, hi.
Hello. And thank you, Gabe. I see what you were doing. You're just easing us into the Joe horror story. So thank you. That was very, trigger warning for the audience here today. No, I'm just kidding. But I am very excited for today's episode. I heard we have quite a presentation in store. So bring it. I'm ready.
And Gabe, before we begin, I got to ask. So Nozomi Networks, that name sounds like it could be, Japanese descent. It sounds like it could be maybe Italian descent. What's the name? Where does it come from?
Well, that's a good question. A question that I don't have an answer for. So I don't know what they were thinking when they created the name, but they are not Japanese. So it's got a Japanese thing, definitely. Okay. We have gotten some pictures from, Japan, people like in the train station. I think it's a town or whatever. But no, our founders are Italian. So a couple of very talented Italian guys. They founded the company back in 2014. And it's not in Italy. It's the headquarters are in Switzerland, really close to Italy. I don't know the reason for that either, but it's in Switzerland anyways, in the very north of Italy. So. Well,
since this is Tech Deck Karaoke and 90% of what I do here is just make things up and hopefully make them sound intelligent, I'm going to go with Nozomi is an ancient Japanese word for networking happiness. And so that's where it comes from. You heard it here first, inaccurately and totally made up on the spot. That is what it means. And with that, I am going to open Gabe's slides and tell you what they do over there. What we're going to be talking about is a proactive approach to cybersecurity, operational technology, and Internet of Things environment. So OT and IoT. For those in the traditional IT stack, the IT space that most of us know and love running enterprise IT, when we're talking about OT or operational technology, this is like the dark horse of technology that most of us don't experience or know exists. This is the technology operating the manufacturing floor, the logistics and warehousing. This is all of the technology that operates equipment driving other pieces of the business, right? So these can be things like appliances running operating systems and storage hardware for medical record transactions. This can be things like a machine or piece of equipment producing and inspecting medications as they're made in a factory plant. But it's the technology that operates our environment. So just with that frame up behind the discussion, let's continue on. When we look at this as I described, dark horse of technology, we're going to take a little bit of an analogy, and I'm going to try and figure out what this analogy is bringing to terms here. But we're talking about Columbus, and we're looking at 95% of the pre-Hispanic population of America disappeared in the first 130 years of arrival after Columbus. So Columbus could be considered a plague on his own. And if you do some history and research on the gentleman, he was not necessarily a nice human being. But it wasn't the weapons, it wasn't their technological superiority, it was disease. A lot of the way that this happened was diseases that were brought forth that people didn't have immunities for. Some of it intentional, some of it unintentional, some of it unknown. But that disease came through. The analogy, I'm hoping, will draw itself on the next slide. What is our disease in networking? When we're looking at 2021, approximately 90% of manufacturing organizations had their production or energy supply hit by some form of cyber attack. So when you're looking at what we're talking about, it's all of these OT environments that tend to be an insertion point for these attacks. These don't necessarily have the care and feeding that we have in the traditional IT stack, but they have all the same vulnerabilities. They don't necessarily have the security that we have in the old stack. And I'll give you an example that is real world that happens in this world. First of all, a lot of these devices, appliances that are purchased for manufacturing, for pharmaceutical, for warehousing, for logistics, for healthcare, come with an embedded operating system. Those embedded operating systems are owned by the appliance vendor, and therefore whatever patching and versioning is controlled by that appliance vendor. In many cases, these are actually outdated. In fact, when Gabe and I were first talking to invite him onto the show, one of the things he was talking about was an operating system that exists on these devices. That operating system is called Windows NT or Microsoft NT. You probably aren't familiar with that unless you're as old as I am, because that operating system has not been a production operating system for many, many moons, but it's still running equipment behind the scenes in the OT world. So we need to think about how we're securing these environments, how we're connecting them, but doing so securely. And so as we look through the other examples on this slide, what we're really talking about is where are these attacks coming in? Where are these problems coming in? Or to relate back to our last slide, what's the actual disease? It's not the cyber weapons attacking us. It's the disease of the lack of security, control, and connectivity within our OT environments. So when we look at the cybersecurity landscape, we've got a changing world. It's going to require innovative solutions. We need to be more proactive in this world. And I love that statement so much. Cybersecurity, since the dawn of the industry, has been a very reactive thing. We connected a few universities in the predecessor to what became the internet, and then somebody proved a concept of a worm or virus, and then somebody proved a concept of a way to stop it. And then it's always been this cat and mouse game, with the attacks being the cat and the mouse playing defense. We've got to get out and get in front of it, because we're losing this game when we're not. We can't work with some of the old ways in which we used to do this. A traditional way to do this, especially in highly secure environments, was air gapping an environment. Air gapping means not connected to any other network or entity. And you see these a lot in utility companies. You see them a lot in the three-letter agency space, the DoD or the federal government, with classified, top secret, and secret networks. When you're looking at that, it's nearly impossible to do that, because you have to keep those systems up to date. You have to get information in, you have to get information out. So wherever those lines bleed across that air gap in whatever way, you've got a potential vulnerability. You've also always got the human involved. If your air gap is stopping your admin from doing their job, they'll find a way around it. So we also need to keep looking down. How are these attacks increasing in complexity? How is artificial intelligence being used both as a security tool and as an adversarial tool? And then how are we dealing with all of the aging infrastructure we have, including unsupported software? And again, this software might be unsupported by your traditional IT environment and not authorized because it's out of date and not up to patch levels, but your appliance vendor that's running that factory floor may not allow it to be updated, meaning you've now got to deal with this security anomaly that is not meeting your security standards, but you still have to have it operating and secure it. So what now? How do we look at this problem and how do we address it? The approach being taken by Nozomi Networks is cybersecurity specifically focused in that OT or operational technology world. And it's a move from that reactive security methodology that we're all very familiar with, even if we don't call it that, to a proactive security approach, securing the problems, seeing the problems before they occur. In order to do that, we need to combine a few different things. First, we need centralized management and the ability to look at security and the connectivity it's supporting in a global fashion. So a central management console is going to be key to delivering something like this. Within that, we need a few different components. We're going to need to bring in artificial intelligence so that we can reduce the noise and increase the effectiveness of the security, letting the machines sort out what we really need to know and pointing out the information as quickly as possible. We need threat intelligence and threat intelligence that can adapt quickly to the changing threat environment. And then the ability to bring in things like smart polling to augment this and to understand the health of devices and the security of devices across the environment, but also do so without over congesting the network. So this is being brought together across your infrastructure within the Guardian portfolio. I'm guessing. Cybersecurity in this world, moving it from reactive to proactive, what we need to do is take a look at from a different vantage point. And so using Vantage IQ, we can bring that different vantage point. It's bringing the power of cloud for increased scalability, processing power, and faster detection. So rather than having to have a whole slew of infrastructure supporting this intelligence, this AI, this security, and this connectivity for your OT environment, bringing it in from the cloud. And then being able to use AI-assisted data analysis that will assist that security team in reducing the cyber risk and increasing the speed of response. And again, a lot of what we can do with things like AI in the security world is reduce a lot of the noise. If you're looking at a lot of security products, dashboards, the pew-pew maps that we like to joke about in the security industry, there is a lot of noise. It's a lot of information, a lot of warnings, a lot of things to look at. How do I prioritize that? I can't address everything in real time. So how do I know where my biggest issues are so that I can fix those first and then keep checking off the list? The way this is going to look is Vantage is going to sit over the CMC module, which then sits over the components within the devices, reporting up into the central dashboard and management console, and that getting supported by the cloud with the Vantage portfolio. So when you think about, I'm not comfortable connecting to the cloud, the fact of the matter is you're already connected to the cloud. You're already connected to the internet. Your warehouse, your factory, your environments are already utilizing the internet and the cloud as the backbone of the enterprise network. So first of all, you're already there. There's nothing to fear because you're there starting to use it in some way, shape, or form. And if you don't know what's happening, then it's happening behind your back. More importantly, in the past, you could afford not to be connected to the cloud. Today, you really don't have that option unless you want to over-invest in the infrastructure yourself to build it out and not have the flexibility, scalability, and pay-as-you-go model of the cloud for a lot of specific workloads and environments, especially when you start to look at things like AI and bringing that processing into your security and network. You don't want to be investing in the equipment and the CapEx that comes with it to be able to do that on premises. You want to be able to use that on a pay by drip model within the cloud. So this is something that's going to have to be embraced. And as we're starting to naturally erode those air gaps because they don't hold up anymore, we're starting to realize that this isn't going to be as scary as we think. There are ways to successfully use the cloud to successfully connect mission critical systems to intelligent cloud operations without adding risk. As this all comes together, what you end up with is a complete solution designed specifically for this operational technology space that's going to help mitigate these internal threats and add value across the way in which you manage, monitor, and observe that environment. So Your last question, or maybe not your last question, is I've already got these firewalls. Aren't they doing their job? First of all, firewalls are not necessarily designed for the specific requirements of the operational technology or Internet of Things space, which is supporting that operational technology OT world. Firewalls are designed to allow specific traffic in and prevent specific traffic. And then we might stack some additional features on there, but they're not going to help you secure that Microsoft NT server that's still running that outdated legacy operating system. They might help support certain pieces of traffic going in and out of your environment. But if that machine is compromised and the attack is propagating laterally underneath the firewall, it's not doing anything for you. So from an architectural perspective and a purpose-built perspective, it's not the solution for the way in which we're going to secure the future of OT environments. What we really need to be able to do in these environments is visualize, detect, and respond. Up front, we need to visualize how our network looks, where our vulnerabilities are, what's happening. In real time or near real time, we need to be able to detect new threats, existing threats, what's happening with my assets, and what type of communication is happening across this network. And then when a threat is detected and it's something that needs to be addressed, we need the ability to respond and respond as quickly as possible. So we need to identify the assets that might be compromised. We need to be able to correlate this back to understand how it happened, where it happened, what else is involved. And then we're going to need integrations with the other tools we use. Otherwise, we're creating yet another security silo by buying an appliance. And that's not the intent here with Nozomi Networks. So finally, as you're thinking about the way in which you're securing your OT environments and your IoT environments, you want to be thinking about how you can connect and secure in a proactive fashion to get past the reactive process of trying to respond to threats as they come in. You're going to do this with a modern thinking. You're going to do this with modern technology that is foundational in our current world. And part of that is going to be cloud connectivity. So start to wrap your heads around the possibilities, start to understand where your risks are, and you'll begin to understand why this is a great way to address a problem that has existed in the OT environment for quite a while. All right, Gabe, what do we think? Was that meh? All right, good, brilliant.
Yeah, I almost believe everything you said.
That's really what I'm shooting for in everything I do, is to be almost believed.
Yeah, no, it was good. It was good. Couple of things there that I'm gonna correct, but good. I would say it's more on my side than on yours, because it's the first time you see that presentation. And if you see that up front, like the very first time you see it, you might go the way you actually did it. But there were some comments that obviously you didn't see because you were doing the presentation. But there were some comments that would correct what I'm gonna be covering right now. So essentially, but it was really good, man. It's almost certain. Would you like to keep my job? And then I could just walk away and sell something else, because it was a pretty good job, man. Pretty good darn job.
Well, excellent. For any of our audience that is interested in Nozomi Networks right now, please pay attention to the correct presentation by Gabe so that you know what they actually do.
Cool. So let's go with I wouldn't say the right presentation. Let's say a little bit more complete in terms of the background of what the solution of Nozomi Networks is. So it's a proactive approach to cybersecurity in OT, and OT and IoT, and I wanna stress on the point that being proactive doesn't mean that the solution is actually enforcing anything. So this is very important, because some people, or actually a lot of people in OT environments, are sensitive in terms of decisions being made automatically by certain equipment or certain solutions. So we don't do that. We are passive from that point of view, and gathering information about what's going on and allowing the people to have the right information as soon as possible so they can do what they have to do. So that's essentially a proactive approach, but we are not doing the enforcement. So we integrate with firewalls, of course we do, and things can be done. But it is very important to stress on that particular point. So we're still being proactive, but we don't enforce. So,
Gabe, can I interrupt for a second? So,
absolutely.
Is that automated enforcement aversion coming from the fact that you're talking about machines on a factory floor, and if you stop that machine, you're stopping revenue, right? It's like a measurable dollar figure, so they want human involvement.
Yeah, and not only that, these environments are usually very sensitive to latency. So, and if we are in the middle, we are like a man in the middle, we might introduce a little bit of latency, and we are talking about complex environments where everything is automated and needs to be orchestrated in a way that everything needs to work like a Swiss clock. So we cannot be in the middle just like that. So that's one of the main differences between these and what a regular IT environment is. We do have things like that in IT, but not all of IT works like this. OT, almost everything is like that. So that's why it is very important to stress on that particular point. So latency and the fact that we need to have an operator do the thing. And we provide the information for this operator to do it as soon as possible, as fast as possible, to reduce whatever gap it's just showed up. And well, that's one of the reasons why we connect to the cloud and everything else. But we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. So we already saw this. So essentially, the 95% of the pre-Hispanic populations of the Aztecs, the Incas, Mayans, they all disappear because of disease. So not because they were killed by the Spaniards. And it is funny because when I presented this, this company is European, and I'm essentially this is a poke in the eye for our friends in Italy and Spain, because Columbus was born in Genova, which is an Italian city, right? So, but come on, they didn't do it on purpose. I'm going to put that in quotation because it was disease. It wasn't even on purpose. Sometimes they didn't even know that they were carrying these diseases. So it wasn't them who killed the 100%. So they killed just 5%. Let's put it that way. So sorry. So that's essentially what it is. So these people, they weren't ready for it. That's the point. They weren't ready for it. It was unknown. So they didn't have the tools. Their bodies didn't have the tools, just as your OT environment doesn't have the tools, provided that you haven't done what you have to do. So we have these three elements here. As a matter of fact, we have seen lots of attacks recently. So many of them actually came from internal threats. So Joe explained this very well. So it's not a matter of if you're going to get attacked. It's when are you going to get attacked? You're going to get hacked eventually. So whether it's because you connected unsecurely to the internet, or somebody that hates you just came in and did something against you because you didn't pay him what he wanted to or whatever. So, and this is kind of the most common thing in the world. So it is what it is, and we cannot do anything to change that. So in the cybersecurity landscape, we can see that things are changing. So it's not just a matter of the internal threats, but the tools and the drivers for these actors to do what they are doing. So I am talking here about air-gapped environments, which is no longer the truth in 99% of the environments out there, even OT environments. I would say 100%, but let's put it 99% to be statistically accurate. So nobody's air-gapped anymore. So that's not truth. So but they think like that. So this is people that has been doing the same thing for over 30 years or more, and they still have on top of their minds, well, I'm protected because at least most of my stuff is air-gapped. But newsflash, you're still connecting. So if you need to do something, if you need to do an update, if you need to do, whatever, get a document, you're not going to go into the library and gather some books and read this stuff. So that's not the way it is anymore. You just jump into the internet, and you'll probably do it from the workstation that you're using in your OT environment and connecting to the internet. So what's going on? It's not air-gapped anymore. So if your workstation is connected to the internet, it means that it can be compromised. And workstation has access to other equipment inside of your infrastructure. So no air gap anymore. So it's no longer secure. Yeah, of course it's no longer secure because it doesn't exist. So that's essentially what's going on. So yeah, also the increased complexity of cyber attacks because of the introduction of new tools that are also available for pretty much everybody. So it's no longer about states trying to do cyber attacks, like a warfare, now pretty much anybody can do this. And let's say you have your OT environment that hasn't been updated for years and years. Even a kid can go ahead and turn off whatever robots you have. So as we speak, you'll have your robots making tacos in no time. So that's not what you want. So essentially, you need to keep all these things updated. And if you cannot update it, at least you can try to secure them. Because as Joe said, many of these elements, were designed to be operational for over 1 decade, 2 decades, 3 decades. So when I came out of the data center world, which was the industry where I belonged for like 10 years or so, we consider like 7 years maximum for the equipment that we bought. So 7 years, you have to throw that and buy something new. In OT, you can see equipment operating for 20 years, 30 years. So, and it's still there. In some of the cases, the manufacturers, the vendors for this equipment, they don't exist anymore. And they are still operational. They're still there. You won't find any kind of support for that. Nobody knows anything about it. You just don't touch it. It's there. But you need to secure it. And people doesn't want to turn it off. They don't want to buy anything new because it's still there. It still works. It still does what it's supposed to do. Why would I invest money in buying something that it's going to do exactly the same thing, but it's going to have a newer software? That's the way most people will think.
And Gabe, just a note for our audience on one of your previous points. If you are hacked and the robots in your environment do start making tacos, you can just send them to me. I will solve that problem for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, or at least I'm going to tell you what happened. So probably I'm not going to solve it, but I'm going to tell you what happened. Or I'll eat the tacos, which is kind of one of the things that could happen, right? So AI, it's also one of the things that it's really hot now in the news. So AI is now available for everybody. So people is going to use it. We use it to make a better cybersecurity solution, but essentially everybody will be able to use it for not so good motivations. So AI is going to be available for good or for worse. It's going to be available. And also the aging infrastructure, which is something that I already mentioned. So what now? You think about what can you do if you had a cybersecurity solution that is designed for OT. It's not about bringing something from the IT world and adapting it to the OT world. It is about something that was born natively in this area. So we were born here in OT. That's it. So OT and then IoT, of course. So it's not just about operational technology, it's also about IoT. So we have the Guardian. The Guardian is the kind of the center of everything. So the Guardian is the equipment. It's got a hardware version of it, and then you can also have a virtualized version of it. That sits on top of the infrastructure. And then if you have multiple Guardians, you can have the CMC, which is the central management console, but you can operate without it. The Guardian themselves, they have their own management mechanism. So you can go there in a web browser, and then you can access the Guardian and see what you have to see. But if you want to have a little bit more of a holistic view, you can use the CMC. So that's why the CMC is sitting on top of the Guardian. And of course, the Guardian is on top of the infrastructure, so it connects to a switch. There are elements that you can see on the left side, which are the add-ons. So the Guardian per se has a lot of value and provides a lot of value. You can get lots of things out of it, have the visibility, you can get all the traffic, analyze the assets. It will tell you all the assets that you have, where they are connected, provided that it has been discovered. All the elements that you have on the network, they are chatty. So they'll start talking. And what the Guardian is doing is hearing everything that is going on and analyzing all this information and building the map of your OT infrastructure based on these communications that we just saw coming out of the networking infrastructure. But if you want to have a little bit more capabilities, then you have these three elements that we see on the left side. So we have asset intelligence. You said something about artificial intelligence. It was not that. It's asset intelligence, which, by the way, uses AI. Same thing as Vantage uses AI. So we also use AI here. Asset intelligence is essentially a huge database of elements, of components that are normally available in OT environments. And what we do is we compare every time we see something going through, we compare that with the database and we analyze it and see, is this behavior correct? Is this behavior normal considering what this device is supposed to be? So is it a PLC? Is it a robot? Is it whatever it is, a sensor? Is it a normal behavior? Can be Rockwell, can be Schneider Electric, can be you name it. But is it a normal behavior? What happens when you have, for example, a software update, and then this device starts communicating using a new protocol and a new port? If we don't have asset intelligence, that would create an alert, and it's going to create noise. And Joe also mentioned things about the noise that is being generated in these cybersecurity environments. You have lots of noise. With asset intelligence, you reduce the noise dramatically because you understand the nature of this equipment, even when you update the software and potentially changes the behavior of that component because of the update. So no more alerts being created because of that, because we know that the new software is going to utilize these new protocols and these new ports and these new ways of communicating. So that's essentially what asset intelligence does. Threat intelligence is connecting to the cloud, is connecting to the Nozomi cloud, and gathering information about the newest, the latest and greatest threats available. So downloading signatures and understanding how can new attacks harm my infrastructure. So if we have this information, we are capable of detecting the latest, and I'm not going to say virus because this is not about viruses. This is about malware. This is about other things because this is not an antivirus. This is something different. So antivirus is something else. So we detect threats, people trying to attack, dynamic denial of service attacks, computers that are doing port scans, port sweeps, all those type of things, or even more advanced mechanisms that hackers are using nowadays that have been identified as part of studies. And that's one of the key pieces here is Nozomi Labs. We have a group of researchers that are all the time analyzing what's going on and identifying every day new threats and new mechanisms that are being utilized to attack OT environments and IoT environments. So we put all that intelligence and all that information in the threat intelligence. So provided that you have threat intelligence as part of your Nozomi infrastructure, you will have that intelligence as well. So, and then smart polling. Smart polling is a third thing where you can proactively analyze. Let's say you identify a bunch of endpoints, and some of them looks kind of weird. It shouldn't be there. So you can do smart polling. So it's essentially trying to connect using what we call strategies. So let's say SSH, SNMP, or whatever. So you can try to connect and see if these devices respond somehow. If you can connect, you can provide some credentials and gather information about the devices themselves, like IP addresses, operating systems, brands, whatever. So all sorts of information from the equipment, and then you can add that to the database and compare using asset intelligence if it's good or bad, and of course use threat intelligence to understand if something wrong is going on. Then we have Vantage. So Vantage is the solution that we have in the cloud and allows you to scale. You can escalate. Yes, escalate. You can escalate. You can scale. Actually, you can scale a lot by using the power of cloud. So you have increased scalability, you have increased processing power, and faster detection. And also, it's a lot more flexible in terms of licensing. When you include Vantage, the licensing is no longer on a per guardian basis. So now it's like a whole pool of licenses that you can have. And it doesn't matter if you have a lot of equipment connected or passing through the Guardian X and a little bit in the Guardian Y. Now it's a matter of how many licenses you have overall. So that's one of the interesting things about Vantage. Then we released, like a couple months ago, Vantage IQ. So we announced it. Vantage IQ utilizes artificial intelligence to analyze all this data real time and present you with an analysis based on OT and IoT environments, an analysis on all the data, and so you can understand if you have some sort of risks, if you have some sort of threats or something is going on that obviously correlates with the threat intelligence database, and you can obviously reduce the amount of time that it takes for you to respond to whatever attack. So I put here Vantage on top of CMC, and that's my fault, because you saw that, Joel saw that, and then he said something about like Vantage connecting to CMC and then Guardian. But if you see here, you have a Guardian connected to Vantage, so it is not needed to have the CMC. Once you have Vantage, you don't need to have the CMC. You can have it just in case you lose connectivity. You can still have the CMC just in case. You can have it, but it's not necessary. It's not a mandatory element to have the CMC. So the key, the cornerstone, let's put it that way, the cornerstone of the strategy that Nozomi Networks brings from a cybersecurity perspective is Vantage. So that's the very first thing. But since there is a lot of people that doesn't feel comfortable connecting to the cloud, we'll still provide the solutions that you can have in case you don't want to acquire Vantage at first. But at the end, the value added by Vantage and Vantage IQ is so big that it's going to be a no-brainer to acquire it. So that's essentially what it is. So not comfortable connecting to the cloud, of course you are connected. So you're connected somehow. Even if you do Gmail from your workstation, you are connecting somehow. So you are connected. And today, not connecting to the cloud and not having the latest and greatest fingerprints and threats available, signatures, that's a greater risk than not connecting to the cloud. So imagine that you have somebody that brought a USB thumb drive and connected it to whatever workstation, even if this workstation is isolated. He came with this thumb drive, and the thumb drive was full of malware, and the latest generation malware. How are you gonna detect that? How are you gonna be able to respond to that if you are not connected to the cloud at all? I mean, if you don't have the means to identify this threat. So the idea of not being connected to the cloud and not getting the latest definitions it's just unacceptable. So not in this world. So you need to think differently from this perspective. So what does it have to be with Columbus? Well, it's not about the attack of the colonial pipeline or any of those things. So it's essentially what happened to the Native Americans for the entire continent. Their bodies were not prepared, just as your OT environment is not prepared, provided that you're not connected to the cloud and gathering the latest and greatest signatures. So it's the same thing. So if you are not ready, you're gonna get hit, and it's gonna be bad. It's gonna be really bad. So the entire infrastructure, the entire approach works like this. So you have Vantage, which can go directly to the Guardian, or you can have the CMC, just in case, as I mentioned, and then you have several Guardians down there. And there is an additional element that I put here, which is this pink weird sun that looks like a square rotated. That thing is ARC. So ARC allows you to protect some of these devices that has old operating systems. The oldest operating system we support today is Windows XP. And we have a bunch of Linux distributions, Mac OS, old distributions as well, Unix, and so on. So essentially, no NT40, sorry, Joe, but Windows XP, which is old enough. So lots of Windows XP machines in these environments. That's no longer supported. It hasn't been supported for a lot of time. So what we can do is you can install this element, and you don't have to restart the machine at all. It's a very lightweight sensor that you can implement, and it's going to gather information about the machine itself, the computer, and it's going to tell you what's going on. It's going to analyze. It's going to send some metadata. It's not going to send actual copies of the traffic, but it's going to send metadata to the Guardian, so the Guardian can analyze what's going on. And it will potentially, in the future, that's something that is going to happen, do smart polling as well. So since these elements, and for those of you that are acquainted with the OT environments, you can see here this environment that it's here. We have something called the Purdue model, which is kind of the OSI model for OT. And that's probably not very accurate, but it's kind of that. It's a 5-layer approach where you can have, for example, layer 0. It's the PLCs, the sensors, the robots, and everything that actually operates. It's in layer 0, and then layer 5, where the most advanced things can be found. So it goes from the ground to the most advanced elements. Usually, you have firewalls between them. So that's where the firewall sits. But if you have a problem in one of the layers, the east-west traffic is not being protected. So guardians are usually present in each one of these layers, and are gathering information about what's going on in these layers and providing you with the feedback or the information necessary to identify if there is some problem. So your firewall is not going to do anything there. So that's why we say that, firewalls are necessary, but these firewalls are essentially a perimeter defense. What happens when something is inside of the perimeter? That's the real problem. That's where the insiders are going to harm you at some point. So yeah, of course you have firewalls. Some of these firewalls are even ruggedized. So even if I tell you, yeah, they are designed, they are ruggedized, it can withstand a lot of vibrations and 200 degrees and everything else, but that's not what we are talking about. It's about how the infrastructure is designed and how does it work. So how can you actually mitigate the issues and how can you identify the potential problems? And that's what Nozomi Networks do for you in this case. So we help you by providing you a visualization scheme so you can visualize everything that is going on. You can detect really fast, and we provide you with all this information to respond as soon as possible. So you can correlate, you can identify who was the user that was active at some period of time where something happened. We do have the integrations with some of the firewalls, the major vendors of firewalls, to do things as well, et cetera, et cetera. So when we talk about proactive, that's how proactivity works here. So essentially, it is what it is. And a little bit aggressive when I put here, this is Joe's fault. So we used this back in those days. If you don't like change, you will like irrelevance even less. That's your signature, my friend.
That is one of my favorite quotes. I definitely have used that in many a slide deck. It's interesting that I find that quote so relevant in IT because this is such a fast-paced world. IT, OT, all of it. Technology changes fast. The way we use it changes fast. And yet not everyone, and yet a great majority of us are stuck in doing things the old way while we fade into irrelevance.
Yeah, that's it. I still use that. I just have like two different versions. I have the aggressive version and I have the not so aggressive version, but I had to use it this time.
I saw years ago, I saw a keynote by a 3-letter storage company. And it was an SVP of sales from said company. And he opened the keynote with a quote. And the quote was, and I'm paraphrasing, but the explicative was in there. If I can't win a deal, I'll burn it to the effing ground. And then he hit click. And when he hit click, it attributed the quote to himself. He opened a keynote in front of hundreds of people quoting himself with that garbage. And I'm just thinking, well, if that guy can get away with that garbage, then the bar is so low that I can literally use any quote I want.
Perfect.
All right. Well, that's a horror story.
Yeah. I was like, I got up and walked out. I'm like, if that's how you open it, there's nothing you have to say that I need to hear.
You didn't want to wait to hear what the closing quote was going to be about him?
No. I'm like, I'm sure your customers love you because you're just a pit bull trying to get every sale with no regards for what they need.
And if you knew anything about the brain, and you should if you're in sales, it's like the worst way to entice somebody. That's the best way to shut someone's brain down. There you go.
100%. So Gabe, I really like the approach and what's happening here. And I especially, I like the fact that you're passive. You're not an inline product, so you're not affecting latency. You're not making decisions on behalf of the customer. You're informing them, you're giving the information, and you're collecting it out of band. And I think that's a brilliant approach to the system. I also like the tiered management models where I can have it on premises, I can have it cloud, or I can have it on premises cloud connected to kind of let people both operate within their comfort zone but hopefully grow into new comfort zones instead of more irrelevance.
Yeah, the word proactive usually freaks out some of the guys that works in OT. So that's why I stressed on that point in particular. I don't want people to think that we are actually enforcing without letting you know. So are you going to turn something off while I'm sleeping or something like that? No, that's not going to happen. So that's not the way it is. So you can be proactive without doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think with every technology change, the human race goes through this same repetitive, like, woe is me, this will never work. I mean, I'm sure when the first person spun up a windmill to grind grain, somebody was like, that windmill will never grind grain appropriately. You got to do it by hand with this giant rod. That's the only way to get it done correctly. Humans have to be involved.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I saw a Gartner presentation. I know you love Gartner. I know you do. So I saw this presentation and they said something like, we are moving into a human-centric cybersecurity. And I was like, human-centric, interesting.
Okay.
I mean, I'm like, it's amazing to me that people get paid that much to pontificate on their own BS. It's like, I just feel like it's like just sitting around huffing your own, let's say fumes.
Okay. I'd also like to mention right now that this episode is sponsored by Gartner. So thank you, Gartner. They're great.
Legal disclaimer, that is not true. None of that.
No, that's not true at all. No.
So Mr. Schaefer, what do you think about both of the presentation, the protocol, the product, and Gabe's presentation here?
I mean, Gabe, what you presented clearly made a lot more sense. I will say that it's something that's coming up a lot. So relevant, incredibly relevant. I think the way you walked us through it made a lot of sense. There was a hiccup that I was hesitant to mention, but you did several times actually. I think I counted like 4 or 5 times where you complimented Joe after his presentation. And I just thought we talked about this before the show. But other than that, small little post-production cutout that we'll take, I think you did a phenomenal job. Joe, there were a couple of things there that I thought you were going to get tripped up on. I was waiting to see how you were going to incorporate Columbus. And my brain, of course, kept spiraling deeper and deeper into what was going on at that time. So I was impressed with that. I'll give you that. But I have a clear winner in mind. I definitely have a clear winner. You want to know who it is?
I mean, don't leave us waiting.
Drum roll, please. Gabe, hands down, this one goes to you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That presentation is mine. I created it. So if I don't win, it would be ridiculous.
I got to say, after seeing it twice, I really like, I mean, while it's a bit of a dark analogy, but I really like the Columbus analogy because if we're going to give the good graces and say that the diseases were brought unintentionally and that they were never used as a weapon, what killed the people was not having the immunities, right? The autoimmune responses. And what you're providing is the autoimmune response for the OT network, right? It is that inoculation to allow them to deal with these new threats being brought in by the connected internet. I mean, I grew up in a data center world where things were not connected to the internet. I grew up in a data center world where you brought the technical manuals on a CD or DVD-ROM, actually floppy disk in my time, and you did the firmware upgrades and updates on the same disk, right, of some sort. And for those of you that don't know what a disk is, just get off my lawn. Stay off my lawn. But long story short, that no longer exists. So the ships are coming in. Your immune system needs some help, and that's what you're bringing to the table.
Exactly. That's the idea.
So there's a general rule about an analogy, right? About analogies. First of all, any analogy, because it's an analogy, will eventually fall apart if somebody picks it apart long enough. The term for that person that picks it apart long enough is pedantic tat. I kid. Well, Gabe, this has been a pleasure. It's always good to see you again. It's always glad. I love watching your career grow. I love the fact that you're still enjoying technical marketing. It's technical marketing TME. Technical marketing engineer is not a I wouldn't say it's for everybody, but what I love about it is if you really embrace it, there's a lot of ways you can go with it. I mean, I know TMEs that are super technical, basically engineers building products. And I know TMEs that are super marketing, and then everything in between, blending the two. And so I think it's a very cool space. And by the way, it's extremely required because somebody has to be able to communicate the nitty gritty engineering details to the average person who that isn't their day job.
Yeah, and telling a story, which is key. So everything you can't have like product centric all the time. You need to tell a story so it makes sense for the people that is actually, or at least you want them, if you want them to buy the actual product. So if it doesn't make sense, they're not going to buy it. So that's what TME does.
Agreed. And the story I'm telling myself today is that I won this episode regardless of whatever Sabrina said.
I'm going to tell you what, that joke about get off my lawn, that got me longer than I wanted to admit. So had you been funny earlier, I might have thought about it, Joe. I guess some helpful guidance for your next episode.
Joe, there are really three things I look for: funny, relevant, or interesting. And you just didn't hit the mark on any of them.
I mean, today's not your day. What can I say?
Well, Gabe, thank you very much for being here. And Sabrina, I guess the bashing continues. But
bashing continues. That's right. Hey, you got a couple compliments today. You got quite a few from Gabe, so there you go.
That's true. And luckily, my ego needs no care and feeding. It's self-sustaining.
Well, once again, the reason why I became a TME was Joe. So he was stupid enough to hire me, and then I'm here. So I have to compliment him, man.
I get it. Residual.
Well, thank you very much. And to our audience, thank you very much. If you'd like to be a guest on a future episode of Tech Deck Karaoke, if you've got anything tech related, business, technical, whatever level of depth you want, please let us know. We are more than welcome to have you on. And our job is to make you, your technology, your presentation look good and me look bad. So this is a nice and easy format.
Sounds good. See you next time.